Morning everyone, welcome to Chat UTD. It's been a week or so since my last video because nothing really has been happening, and nothing really seems to be happening now, but there's a lot more stories that are being put out into the media from various different outlets, which I think is worth covering. It started with Bloomberg on Tuesday, who wrote an article to say that the decision from the Glazers as to whether they were going to sell or stay was imminent. You'd hope that that was quite a reliable source because it comes from the financial journalism world, not the football journalism world. And then there's three significant stories I just want to go over from the football journalism world, and then we'll unpick that a little bit. Feel free to get involved with comments, questions, etc. Let's start with Mike Keegan. So yesterday, just to quote directly from what he said, Mail Sport understands that there are now concerns among those involved over whether the Glazers will sell. He also went on to say that the process may be paused. Okay, then Jamie Jackson wrote an article saying that Sir Jim Ratcliffe would be happy for this to go on into next season, or relaxed about it going into next season. It's obvious it's going to go into next season because next season starts in 3 weeks. But I guess it implies that it's not going to be sorted out anytime soon, basically. And he also mentions that Sheikh Jassim is getting frustrated and growing frustrated, and he's questioning whether or not the Glazers are going to sell. He questioned their intentions, apparently. Then Ben Jacobs on Twitter pretty late last night said that, again I'll quote, "Understand behind the scenes Glazers are deliberating whether offers are high enough to sell now," which is quite significant to me. He also mentions the Club World Cup, the expanded Club World Cup, as a reason for them to stay. That's in 2025, and the expansion of the Champions League. I'm going to start there and unpick that a little bit. I looked into it, and the winners, the World Club Cup, UEFA have allocated potentially 12 slots. UEFA have 12 slots allocated to them. And I looked up what you have to do, basically, to enter, to qualify. So winners of the Confederation's top club competitions between 21 and 24, they'll get in. So Champions League winners, basically, of 21, 22, 23, 24. With additional, so how many is that? 21, 22, 23, 24, so that's 4. I imagine 25 as well, wouldn't it? Anyway, with additional teams to be determined by a club ranking over the 4-year period. So I looked at our club ranking UEFA at the moment, and it's 7th, which really surprised me. Sevilla are lower than us, which, what have we done in Europe in the last however many years? Nothing. So I've not even been in the Champions League every year for the last few years, so I'm quite surprised by that. However, that's what it is. We're 7th. So as it stood right now, we potentially would get in on that criteria. But I carried on looking, and you can only have 2 clubs per association, and what I assume that means is per country. And City and Chelsea are already in there. I think the only way that changes is if, let's say, Arsenal won the Champions League next year, then obviously that overrides that rule. So I don't think, unless we won the Champions League, I don't think we'd get in that competition. I tried to look at what the prize money would be, or the entrance money would be to get into that competition. I couldn't find it. So again, if anybody has any ideas of that, let me know. I don't think we'd be talking billions by any means. I think we might be talking, I'm guessing 50 to 100 million, given that the Champions League is what? I think 50 to 100 million to get into the Champions League each year. They're not game-changing sums of money when you look at what our club needs and what the Glazers usually take out of the club. So I think it's worth sometimes just unpicking this journalism, in that it's very easy to throw a comment out there like that they're thinking about the Club World Cup, they're thinking about the Champions League. I think basically journalists like us don't know anything really about what the intention of the Glazers are, and they're trying to find reasons to make some sense of all this, understandably. But when I look at the Club World Cup, I think it's a pre-season tournament. I think it's June and July of 2025. Look at it in 2000 when we didn't play in the FA Cup because of the inaugural Club World Cup. It was a holiday for the lads, and they sat by the pool having a laugh most of the time. The only person who seemed to take it seriously was Gary Neville when he made those 2 mistakes against Vasco da Gama, and it took him ages to recover from it. No one else was taking it seriously within our team because we'd already won the Intercontinental Club Cup, which at that point was taken more seriously. The South American champions against the European champions. We won that in November. So, bit of a history lesson for you there. But the how serious is that going to be? Even if there is big prize money, a sponsor's going to be like, oh, well, they're in the Club World Cup that's expanded to 32 teams. I might be wrong, but I think journalists at times are stabbing in the dark and are trying to find reasons. That, for me, is not a justifiable reason to stay when you consider the amount of money that the Glazers are going to need to stay. It's small fry what they're going to get from a Club World Cup if we get in it, which looks highly unlikely that we're going to get in it. So that's worth just unpicking that, I think, because that's a throwaway comment that people might go, oh, well, it's a Club World Cup, that's why they're staying. Well, have a little look at it. We're highly unlikely to get in it, and what's the prize money for it anyway? The Champions League thing, there's a high chance we won't get in the Champions League season upon season when they're there. That's the evidence of the last 10 years suggests that, even if it does expand to the top 5. The transfer window so far, if it stays like it is, which if the Glazers stay, that will be our transfer window. We're rubbish at selling players, and we bought 3 players in. I'm going to come back around to that at the end of the video. But if that stays as it is, I think we'll struggle to get in the Champions League next season. People have recency bias, and they think Erik ten Hag's an absolute genius. He can do whatever he wants with quite poor resources, and there's evidence to suggest that's true, but that's one season. And he ran them into the ground last year. Can they do it again this year? With not really much improvement to the team. Anana will make a big difference. And having a striker, which we still haven't got yet, but having a striker will be good, but we need 2. And he's a young lad. I'm going to come back to that. But my takeaways from all of those different stories are, first of all, the media don't know. Nothing's been put out for quite some time. Nothing significant from any media outlet because everything's gone very quiet. I remember about a month ago, nothing had been said for a while, and then it was a Friday afternoon, and there was all of a sudden a lot of stories came out. One was about Sheikh Jassim, and I think it was his new bid. Then there was something about the legal implications of Sir Jim taking over, and that the 31% are threatened to sue the club. Then there was something about the PSG president advising or being a go-between with the Glazers and Sheikh Jassim, all in the same day after weeks of silence. And this news that was put out that day was referring to things that had happened probably a month, 2 months prior. So either that had happened, for example, when the PSG president spoke to the Glazers, that had happened and no one knew about it until that Friday, and they released it then, or they'd been hanging on to it for an appropriate time just to drop some new news. I think it's the former. I think they didn't know, and then someone's leaked something and they put it out there. But they're not talking. That's not recent news. That's news that had happened then, a month or so previously. The stuff that was going on with the shareholders, 31%, that had been spoken about for quite some time before the story was released. So we're in a process now where people are putting out stories, and as we speak, things will be happening that these guys have no idea about. They're probably a month behind the game, or maybe even further than that. So it's easy as a journalist, I would say, to put the situation together and formulate something where you say, well, Sheikh Jassim's getting frustrated. Do you know that? No, but you can make an educated guess to say that that's the case. It's going into next season. Yeah, obviously it's going into next season. The process might be paused. In some ways, it has been paused because nothing's happened. But you're using language which isn't too loaded, but for a fan who's anxious would look at that and say, "What? Like the whole thing's on hold then? Like what? They're not going to sell?" And we get really worried about it. I think we've all got suspicions of what the Glazers are up to. Going back to Mike Keegan's, those involved, concerns among those involved over whether the Glazers will sell. So I don't think any of the stuff that was out there yesterday is solid gold pieces of journalism. I think it's people who might have snippets of information from certain sources involved, but they can't give much away, I don't think. And then they've kind of put their angle on it to put something out there. But it's interesting that three or four stories in 2 days have come out after weeks of nothing, and I almost think it's just something out there to break the silence, maybe. Another takeaway I take from it is that the Glazers are comfortable. They've got their feet firmly under the table. I think they will sell because they have to, but the horse has bolted on any pressure being on them to sell imminently because nobody's put any pressure on them. The fans haven't put any pressure on them. Don't tell me that the process. I really admire the 58 because they're trying their best, but the fan base is too passive. So I think the 58 with a really militant, hostile fan base, those two coming together would be phenomenal because they work tirelessly to try and make things happen. But you can only lead a horse to water. You can't make it drink. And I was disgusted when they arranged that 18 minutes to wait outside protest against Aston Villa, and basically there's about 2,500, and I think, to be honest, a lot of them probably weren't going to the game anyway, because when you look around the stadium on the telly, there wasn't even any gaps for the first 18 minutes. That's disgraceful that people won't even go outside for 18 minutes. And that was a precursor, I think. Well, I know because I'd heard an interview where they said so. It was a precursor to see how, if they could start to get towards a boycott. That's not going to happen. We can't even wait outside for 18 minutes. So the fans are doing nothing, really, in the grand scheme of things. Pockets of fans are trying their best. Others don't want to know. They'll moan about the Glazers, but they won't do anything about it. So the horse has bolted on that, on putting them under any significant pressure to sell. And as I said in one of my other videos, if we don't know by now how they operate, and we don't know that they're going to try and wow you with a signing or spin, or have a half decent transfer window, or that they're basically going to not communicate and drag something out. If you don't know all that by now, then more fool you. Not you directly, but a person who would think that, obviously. There's no pressure on by the authorities. There's no pressure seemingly by the bidders. One of my other takeaways from the last couple of weeks, really, and I've thought this for a while actually, is that if, and this is speculative, if Sheikh Yazim said, "I'm done, I'm walking away, I'm retracting my offer, and I'm out of the process," the Glazers would absolutely cack themselves, because they are in a position now of seemingly of power, but it's false power, because they haven't got any money. They owe, the club owes, so therefore they owe £1 billion, which is crippling our ability to do anything, really. We can't raise money from selling players because there's no level of expertise in the club to do that. It takes too long for them to do anything. So there's players there this summer. There's 10 players that they could get rid of. I won't go over them because I've done it before. But that generates probably potentially around 150 to 200 million pounds. And that could happen relatively easily to get them off the books. But they can't do that. One, because they've overpaid for them and other people won't pay their wages, but two, because they're just poor. They won't take a hit, and they're just poor at doing it. So they won't take a hit because for example, to supplement the wages or something like that. So they'll keep them on the books with all of their wages, which business-wise and FFP-wise doesn't make any sense. One way or another, you're going to lose money. And it's going to hamper your ability to run the club. So they haven't got any money. They can't borrow any more money. They owe £1 billion. They can't sell players to generate money. And the club needs £2 to £3 billion spending on it in the next 2 to 3 years. With the stadium, they could spend probably between 2 and 500 million to get it repaired, if you like. And let's not forget, they don't care about it being a state-of-the-art stadium. They don't care about being the best. They don't want to put any money in. So if they could get away with the bare minimum, they would. So I do understand that is an option for them. They could do it on the cheap, and they could repair what needs to be repaired. There's no pressure on them, again, really, to make it a super stadium. No, there's not. They'll find another way of doing it. They'll sell the naming rights. They'll do whatever they need to do to not spend that money, that 2 billion that needs spending on the stadium, or $1 billion, or whatever it is. But nonetheless, the whole club needs a lot of money spending on it, not just the stadium. To get them in the Champions League every year, which gives them more money, to make them an attractive proposition if the TV rights come up, to put them in the conversation for a World Club Cup competition. They need to spend money to make that happen, and they're not going to do that because they haven't got it. And even if they had it, they wouldn't spend it. They'd take dividends out. They can't take dividends out in the next few years. They are absolutely backs to the wall, screwed. So this talk of they never wanted to sell in the first place, they're not even serious about getting investors. It's like, well, yeah, that's a really, really easy comment to make again, but have a proper look at the finances of the football club. We're absolutely on our arses. So there's no way they can afford to stay, whether they want to or not. So at some point they'll sell. It's just whether or not we, as I said, the horse is bolted on any immediate pressure for them to sell. So the situation we're in now is, by the look of it anyway, and by what people are saying is, this is an ongoing process now where they have bidders, but they're almost not treating it like a sales process. This is almost like they're just treating that as interest, and they know that's there for whenever they decide to go, because there's no pressure on them. So what essentially we're saying is they could still be, they'll go, but they could still be here in 2025. Now I know, and probably you know, that by 2025 they'll have run the club further into the ground, and they will have run out of even more ground. But then as a club we're suffering. We're another 2 years behind. If you said to me, I can absolutely guarantee you, Nick, that by June 2025 United will have the right owners in the football club, would you take it? I'd say yes. Yeah, I would say yes, because I'm desperate. And that'll have been around 20 years of these idiots running our football club. But do I want that to happen? Absolutely not, because we've got a chance here. Football moves quickly. We've got a very good manager, and we've got the bare bones of a decent squad. That if proper money is spent on it, and it's spent strategically, and we get rid of what we don't need, and we harness some of our younger players, we've got a real chance to achieve things. But not with them as the owners. And what this is all hinting at is that they are going to go because they have to, but it could be 2025, could be 2026, could be 2030. Well, in which case, this whole process has been a farce, hasn't it? And I would want them picked up for share price manipulation, because they've had no intention to sell, quite clearly. Just before, I wasn't intending to do a long video today, but there was a lot to cover. Just before I finish, this transfer window, and again it brings me back to the fans placating the Glazers and being easily appeased by them. There's too much out there to suggesting this has been a great transfer window. This is we're probably halfway through the transfer window, but the next bit is dependent on getting new owners. It's been all right so far. I wouldn't say it's been as great as everybody else seems to think it is. Mason Mount is a neither here nor there signing. Anana's a brilliant signing, potentially transformative signing. We got him for next to nothing, which I think is more luck than judgment, but brilliant signing. Højlund we haven't got yet, by the way, but looks a very good, promising young player who's the type we would miss out on previously and then be regretting it. And we've sold Tellez. Correct me if we've sold anybody else. we need to sell 10. So we've bought 3, we've sold 1. We need to buy 6 at least, and we need to sell 10. And there's 10 open goals to sell, by the way, really, in many ways. Maybe Sancho would be a bit trickier and Maguire, but they need to go, so get them out. If the Glazers stay, which they are going to stay, and there's no announcement made about a new owner in the next couple of days, then this transfer window will stay as it is. We will have bought the 3 players, and I'm hoping we get Højlund. We'll have bought the 3 players, bargain basement for, you're buying Mason Mount, we need Caicedo and Rice, that type of calibre of player, and we got Mason Mount for not that much, for a fee that wouldn't be much less than what we pay for Caicedo by the look of it, but anyway. So that's just, again, incompetence rather than the money you're spending. Mason Mount isn't a pedigree title-winning midfield player. He's not. He's a final pieces of the jigsaw squad player. But that's what we're operating. Onana, brilliant. Højlund, great. But you need also then to sign a top draw striker to go alongside us, so you can bring him on, because he's not going to lead the line next season. It's like in '96, if we didn't have Cantona and Cole, it's like us going, right, we're buying Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and that's it. We bought Ole Gunnar Solskjaer when we had Cantona and Cole. That's what Højlund should be. He should be the signing when we've already got players that are quality up front, established players, or we buy another established striker. It's not enough. It's not enough. We need at least 1 more midfield player and at least 1 more striker. Johnny Evans doesn't count. Sorry, if anyone was going, we've got Johnny Evans. Not against it, but he doesn't. That's not a signing. And we've sold 1. So if that is the end of the transfer window, which it is, if the Glazers stay, that's rubbish. Toss with what we need. It comes back then to the Ben Jacobs thing. How are we going to qualify for the Champions League? How are we going to do well in Europe when that's our squad? We didn't do enough last year, and Ten Hag is such a good manager that he got us through it. We haven't added it significantly enough. I would argue that the 3 signings we've got now, plus what we had last year, should have all been last year. We needed 8 signings last summer. But we're always a year and a half, 2 years behind the game. Bought Bruno Fernandes 18 months later than we should have done. Finally, Maguire wasn't the right one, but bought Maguire. We needed a centre-back of top draw pedigree. We needed a centre-back for 18 months, bought one 18 months later than we should have done, for more money than we should have bought him for. Or, as I said before, the clues are in the trail. If you don't know the Glazers do things like this by now, then you've been living with your hands over your eyes. And it will carry on like that. So, in some ways, reassuring to think, yeah, there is an end game. They are going to go because they can't stay. And I think that is what's being alluded to in the stories that we're hearing, because they can't stay, for the reasons I've said before. But what if that's 2027? We've got another 4 years of these gremlins putting our handbrake on all the time. You can't operate a football club like that properly successfully as we would want it to be. Really wasn't intending it to be this long, but there we go. If anyone's watching, like, comment, subscribe. Up the Reds, Glazers out.